I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1940. My father was born in Cincinnati, and my mother was born in Osgood, Indiana. And her father was a principal of a one-room schoolhouse in southern Indiana. And he also had a little country store as well. And when she was 12 years old, she was the oldest of 5 children. And her mother died in childbirth. And so she matured very quickly and helped raise those children. But I know that the example her father set for all of them was significant. And he had a real passion, obviously, for education, which was instilled in my mother's family as well. She actually graduated from high school. My father only went through the 6th grade, and then he had to go to work in Cincinnati. He was a clothes cutter, cut clothing for suits for the Kuppenheimer Suit Company, which was an old German suit making company based in Cincinnati at that time. And then he went from there and gradually opened up his own dry cleaning shop in this little community that was a blue-collar suburb of Cincinnati. St. Bernard was the name of the city. My grandfather on my dad's side, for whatever reason, was not in the family after my dad was about 6 or 7 years old. So to his credit, he always had jobs and worked hard, and I think that's one of the reasons the work ethic was so prominent for him, and he displayed that for us in a way that you sort of never knew what was coming next, so you needed to be sure that you were always providing for your family and doing all that you could. So he was so busy. He worked literally most days 12 hours a day at the shop. And there were times when he was not as available as he would have liked to have been, I know. But with that said, he always provided for the family, showed a real interest in what we were doing, and he had a wonderful sense of humor, which kind of kept everything in perspective. He had a built-in community spirit. He was always involved in the work of the city where we lived, a small municipality which was pretty well surrounded by the city of Cincinnati. It was a little town, St. Bernard, and about half the community was Procter & Gamble, really manufacturing operations for Procter & Gamble. Ivory soap back then was made there. Very blue-collar family, but he was always involved. He served as treasurer of the city for a number of years, was a dry cleaner, pressed his own clothes, worked 6 days a week. He was a Roman Catholic. My mother was Baptist when they married, and so you can imagine back in that day, that was a little bit different combination. But they loved each other, and you could tell that, and they worked it all out, and he respected where she was coming from, and she certainly did where my dad was coming from. But an ecumenical marriage back then was a little bit different, but that's where we grew up. My parents probably represented a lot of folks of that generation. Did not show love in public a whole lot. Didn't say to us, I love you regularly, as we do with our children. And I do think it was almost part of the culture because they had a lot of friends who they socialized with, that we spent a lot of time with those families and their children, and sort of that's kind of how it was. It wasn't just with my parents. My wife's family, on the other hand, and she is from the South originally, and maybe that's a cultural difference in the South, but they are huggers. In fact, first time I met her mother and her grandmother, they both hugged me as I was leaving, and I thought, now, this is a little strange, you know. I barely know these people, but they were very warm, and they always said to their children, I love you, and it's the last thing that they said as the girls left. My wife was one of 3 daughters, and we've employed that practice with all of our children. as well. And again, I don't say that in any spirit of, gee, I wasn't loved or taken care of. It was just sort of how it was. There was a brother who was the first of 3 children, but he died within a few days of when he was born. And then about 2 years later, my parents had my older brother, Ed, who is 4 years older than I am. And he worked for years at Procter & Gamble, was extremely, or is, extremely bright. Did not go to college, decided that he was very interested in getting married right out of high school, and worked at Procter & Gamble, but to his credit, worked his way up as a member of the human relations staff and became a counselor for their HR department. We have a good relationship. He is retired from Procter & Gamble, lives in Cincinnati, and seems very happy. He has 2 children and spends a lot of time with them as well.